Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Serwich, and I am a board member of the Torch Conservation Center in Alden, Michigan. Our mission is to promote the stewardship of the land and water in the Torch Lake Watershed. And thank you so much for tuning in. I am here with Peg Comfort. Peg is the president of the board of directors for TCC. She's also a retired teacher, conservationist, naturalist, and she's the author of the new book, Great Lakes Wetland Walks, and she's good enough to join us here today for a quick talk about the plants and birds in and around Torch Lake. Hi, Peg. How are you?
I am great.
Good. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being available for this chat. So I want to kick us off by just talking briefly about some of the hidden treasures of the Torch watershed. You know, for some of the people who might be tuning in, they might not be very familiar with what's in and around Torch Lake, and there's no better person to tell us what treasures we have in our watershed than you. So can you give us a quick couple of hints?
Sure. I've lived in the Torch Lake watershed for 40 years and have gotten to know plants and animals and the woods and the lay of the land, so to speak. One of the things that is unique about the Torch Lake watershed are the wetlands that used to be here that are no longer here. We have, the watershed used to be 20% wetlands, and now we're less than 1% wetlands. And you may wonder, well, where'd they go? Well, the homes that we've built and the driveways and roads that we built and barns that we've built are now covering those wetlands. And so we've lost all the plants and then of course the animals that rely on that habitat. And wetlands are important because they filter the runoff from the land before it enters the lake and the 40 tributaries that contribute to Torch Lake. So wetlands are really important. The unfortunate part is you can't really restore wetlands. Once they're gone, they're gone. So it's one of the reasons that Torch Conservation Center is involved with land conservation is we want to protect those remaining wetlands. There are a couple of unique wetlands that remain in the watershed. Some of them are what we call perched wetlands, which are little depressions, usually less than an acre, but sometimes up to 5 acres, that collect rainwater and they recharge the aquifer. So they're important for our drinking water. Another unique wetland feature are fens. And fens are peat-forming wetlands that are really hot spots of diversity. So you find a lot of rare plants, especially carnivorous plants like the pitcher plant and the sundew that trap insects and dissolve them for food. Another ecological treasure is, of course, our northern hardwood forests. And being spring, the hardwood forest is really important for people who like to hunt for wild leeks. And our morel mushroom hunters find morels in the northern hardwood forest. It used to be that after the glaciers, many thousands of years after the glaciers, the hardwood forest grew and covered 80% of the land around the lake. But now we only have 60% of the land is covered by forest. So we've lost 20% of the forest. And the forest is important because it gives us clean air, it gives us clean water, and it also gives us these beautiful spring flowers that everybody loves to see when they walk in the woods. The spring beauties and the trillium and the wild oats and the Dutchman's breeches and all those gorgeous wildflowers. And the morels that people see.
Yes, I wish I had some morels right now.
They're just starting to pop up because we had a couple of days of real deep soaking rains, and then it warmed up into the high 60s and low 70s, and that's just what morels like to pop up.
So it's safe to say that there's a lot of ecological diversity in and around the Torch Lake watershed, and it's something definitely worth protecting. But like every other place on planet Earth, essentially, there are environmental threats to the watershed. Can you talk with us about what some of those big threats are, and kind of, you know, how they need to be addressed a little bit?
Well, probably there are sort of two major threats that come to mind. The first one is invasive species. And most of us don't pay too much attention to invasive species. We don't know what they are. We know they come from other countries, but they don't really interfere with our daily lives, but they interfere a great deal with the natural systems that are here. The northern hardwood forest that I just mentioned is especially hit hard by invasive species. We all know that Dutch elm disease, obviously, didn't come from here and wiped out the elm trees. So we don't have elm trees anymore. We know about the emerald ash borer, which has taken out our white ash and our green ash and our black ash. And so we don't have very many ash trees anymore. And now beech bark disease, which is related to or caused by a beech scale insect that came from Europe, is wiping out the beech trees. And there's an Asian insect that's attacking the hemlocks. Of course, we know that chestnut blight wiped out the chestnut trees. That came from Asia. Mm-hmm. So invasive species are a prime problem for the northern forests that we have. And most people don't look at their trees, don't pay too much, they sort of take trees for granted. And so they don't pay attention to what's happening to their trees. And early detection is really critical in preventing the impacts of invasive species. So that's one major threat, is invasive species. I hate to imagine a time when we don't have those early spring flowers, which if we lose the maple trees that are left, they provide the shade and the leaf litter that nourish those beautiful spring plants. So it's really important that we pay attention to the trees on our property in order to see what's coming and to get the help from the county forester and other nurserymen to take care of those before they get out of control. Another threat, I think, is the lack of a stewardship ethic that we feel obligated to take care of our land for the plants and animals that live there, to make sure that they can thrive. So we have the pollinators, the bees, the birds, the other insects to pollinate our crops that we rely on for food. And all of these threats, these two threats, major threats, also impact the lake itself. So invasive species also happen in the water when you don't clean, wash, and dry your boat. So you bring in invasive species and they cause problems in the lake. When you bring invasive round gobies from Lake Michigan and use them as bait when you go fishing, or you dump your bait bucket into the lake without thinking about it, people unknowingly contribute to the problem and upset the balance that both the lake and our streams and the forest have held in balance for centuries. But these things upset that balance, and so we need to make an effort to return it.
Certainly, and that's that our organization, Torch Conservation Center, that's something that we deal with quite a bit, especially with regard to our personal relationship with the water in Torch Lake and the environment of Torch Lake Watershed. We had Keith Ross last week have a discussion with me about land conservation and how people can be very intentional with donating land. And if they don't have land to donate and cultivate and conserve, well, then they can financially support conservation efforts. And we talked a little bit about Torch Conservation Center's Land Conservation Fund. So today, my last question to you is, how can people out there listening who are just learning about the ecological diversity of the Torch watershed and some of the threats that are posed, how can people listening help? What can we do to protect our ecosystems, wildlife, and the lake itself? What are some things that we can do?
Well, being a teacher, of course, it's all about education to me. It's first and foremost important that you understand that these systems are more fragile than we thought they were, and that our actions impact both the land and the water systems. And so we need to educate ourselves about what we can do. And conservetorch.org's website has lots of tips for people to take small actions that can have a big impact on protecting the water quality in the lake, protecting their drinking water, and restoring the shoreline and connecting the forest that's been fragmented by our development. We can plant native trees. We can plant buffers along the shore, buffer gardens along the shore of our streams and of the lake itself. You can get to know your property, get to know the trees on your property. Which of them are invasive trees? For instance, if you have autumn olive on your property, you can eradicate, take out the invasive species on your property, which helps it from spreading to other properties. You can install native plants in your gardens, in your planters, along your shore, in your front yard, your backyard. We have information on our website about all of those things, and we've made it easy for people to do the right thing in order to care for the land and water here.
Excellent. So everyone, if you're listening, take a look at conservetorch.org. There's a ton of helpful hints about how you can help us steward the land and water of Torch Watershed. Also, if you are interested, please check out Great Lakes Wetland Walks, available at grassriver.org by the great Peg Comfort, our fearless leader, our founder and president of Torch Conservation Center. Peg, thank you so much for being here today. It's been really wonderful chatting with you, and I hope that we all take time to check out some of our awesome ecological treasures in and around Torch Lake.
Thanks, Emily. Have a great day.